Hey, how's it going? And today we're taking a look at toggling visibility off and on with an overlay. And this has, of course, a lot of applications. What this looks like is if I come into the game, I'll start from scratch. And I go start game. I just have this button. All I have is a button and a verse device, and the rest is verse code. And I walk over to the button and I hit E. You see I get a message that says you have won. I hit E. Oops, I hit E again. I get you have lost. You have won, you have lost, you have won, you have lost. But notice how that as I'm doing this, right, it's in the same space. The message is in the same space. And that's the beauty of the overlay, is that we can use our space, what limited space we have, more efficiently, because I'm just toggling the visibility off and on. So I'll go ahead and end the game. And all we need for this is really the verse device. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of one of these spawners. And then I'm just going to go get a button device. Or this could be anything really to trigger it. It could be a trigger or a mutator zone or whatever you really want. So we have our button in the scene. And then we'll go ahead and make our verse device here. I'll just call this Hello World 55 and go create. Save selected and clear out my search bar, and we'll go take a look at this real fast. Now I already have the code written for this. Let me make this big and we'll walk over this a little bit. Control V. Okay, here we are. So here we have our modules up here on top, and this is the overlay example. And then we need to create two message types for each of our text blocks. So there's label 1 and label 2. And then we have our buttons at editable and our spawners at editable. And this is what I realized is really important, is the objects that are going to be on whatever our UI is, whether it's an overlay or a canvas or whatever, those objects or instances need to be initialized up here at this level, not within the UI level here. You can do a lot of things down here as far as adjusting some settings, but the actual creation of the object needs to be up here. The reason why is that we need to instantiate it up here on a variable level so that we can access it down here. Scope wise, we need to put it up here so we can access it wherever we are in our code. That's why. And then we're creating a toggle switch here. I'm calling it my switch logic set to false. And then on begin play, there's essentially just three methods here. One that kind of creates our UI, initializes, gets our player UI, and sets that all up. And then we create our UI here, and then our toggle visibility is down here. So there's just three methods here. And so the button subscribes to the toggle visibility, and my spawner subscribes to make message. So this just goes through and gets our player UI, and then this converts the agent into a player type, because you need the player type. So this is actually casting right here. So it's casting from an agent to a player there. And then once we have that, we can make a call to our create widget. I'll create the widget, and then we'll assign it to new UI, and then we'll add a widget to our player UI, this whole thing to our player UI. Now up here, I've set my text 1 and my text 2 as our text blocks. And when you do this, initially, there's other settings you can throw in here, but I'm just adjusting the color up here at this level. So this is going to be of the overlay type, which allows us to put objects on top of each other. And in this case, we're putting two text blocks on top of each other, because that's my text 1 and my text 2, which are both text blocks which we created up here. Now, once we have these created up here, like I was saying, we can reference them anywhere in our code. So here, we're just going to go, and we don't have to do this here. I mean, I could have done this somewhere else, but I'm just doing it here because it seems convenient. But I don't have to do this here. I can do this wherever I want it in the code. But I'm figuring since we're making it, we'll go ahead and set all this at the same time. So what I do is I reference my text block 1. I set the text to the label 1, which is here, up here. And this a text block requires a message type. So we set that all up. And then here I go my text, set visibility, and I set it to, now I just said invisibility here because if we click here, it had this written already as a default. So I just used that, but there's nothing special about this name. It could be really anything. And what I noticed was, as I was doing this, we get into some ambiguity because we create this variable here. And if I do this, I'm going to get an error, and you'll see that it's ambiguous because I've created two of them. And so that's going to be a problem for two. So all I have to do is just append that to a different name, and then it's okay. Everything's okay. So I guess within this scope here, these are conflicting with each other because I've got two different things referencing this kind of the same, essentially a constant is what it is. It's a constant. So that takes care of all of that. And then we can put, when we position this, we're just putting them on top of each other here. That's the beauty of this system, is that you can put these on top of each other and conserve screen space. So here is just a toggle switch. It requires this function takes the agent in that triggers it, and we'll also can get the player's UI this way too if we wanted to. But here again, like I said, we can reference our text blocks wherever we are in the code. So here we just set the visibility. So what I do here is by default I'm setting it to hidden. Here I'm going to make sure it's set to hidden because I'm going to be calling this repeatedly. So these need to basically flip-flop. So when I call it the first time, text 1 needs to be visible, text 2 needs to be hidden, and then when I call it again, because these are flip-flop, this is a flip-flop node essentially. When I call it again, it reverses it. That's kind of the whole thing right there. So there's a lot to explore and play around with in this, but it's really cool to essentially have the same functionality that we have in Unreal Engine, but we have it, instead of using Blueprint visual scripting, we're using VS Code to essentially do what we did in Unreal Engine, but without blueprints. So it's interesting. So anyway, that's all we have to do there. So I'm just going to go ahead and build my VS Code, and I don't get any errors. So we'll come up here into the creative device, drag this onto the scene. I'll go ahead and pair up my button and my spawner. And then I'll go ahead and launch the session. And then we'll be back as soon as it's loaded up. Okay, I'm back, and let's see if this works. So here we are. There's my button. Interact. You have won. You have lost. You have won. You have lost. That's cool. Okay, so it works and we're all good. So I hope you found